Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, it's all about nightmare Karen bosses getting taught lessons, guys. And one OP tells a story about the time a manager duo tries to frame OP to get her fired, and it backfires so hard. I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So this is a long story, and I hope it's as satisfying for you as much as it was for me. I was active duty in the Army for 3 years, and following that, I shifted into the reserves for another 3 years. I was moving back to my home state during the transition from active duty, and I needed a truck scale to weigh the moving truck before returning it, so I could be reimbursed for the move. So while looking for a truck scale, I found a place that I thought would have one, but it turned out to be a company that installed and certified scales. The branch manager and I hit it off as I was explaining what I was there for, and he said he would like to interview me for a job. I thought, sweet. I need something anyway to support my family, and the job sounded pretty exciting. Within a couple of weeks, they had hired me, and I got started learning the ropes and getting the necessary certifications. Things went really well, and I became one of the go-to guys when they needed some of the more intricate work done. I had several job sites that I would go to on a regular basis where the customers loved me. Now, you might be surprised at all the places where scales are used to measure product and sell things. From labs with tiny scales, to big truck scales installed at job sites, to weigh debris from various construction projects. The job was tough physically at times, but I actually did enjoy traveling all over the state and getting to meet some really awesome people. With that said, fast forward to a little over a year after I started at the company. Things had been going really good, and I was going to school in the evenings to get some education to further my career. Now, sometimes the job required all hands on deck on the weekends for some bigger jobs. These jobs would be things like truck scale installs at customer sites for one reason or another. And normally this was fine, and there had never been any issue for me working the weekend, unless I had a drill with my reserve unit. But the company was fine with that as long as I got the needed paperwork for my unit listing the dates I would be drilling. This all changed at the end of May, after I'd been at the company for over a year. I requested some time off over the Memorial Day holiday weekend to take my wife to Myrtle Beach as a late honeymoon. The weekend before that, I had a drill, so I was also unavailable for work. The Thursday before these back-to-back weekends, which had been understood to be weekends I wouldn't be available, my boss calls me after I left the shop for my jobs for the day. My boss calls me and says, "Hey, I need you to tell me which of the next 2 weekends you will work. We have 2 big jobs and we need everyone available." At that, I respond, you know I have drill this weekend and you already approved me being off next weekend to go out of town. The boss replies, well, I need you at one of these jobs, so which one will you be in for? I respond, well, I can't this weekend because drill is mandatory, and if I cancel the hotel I have booked next weekend, it's gonna cost me money in cancellation fees. That's when my boss smugly says to me, well, I think you know the answer to that then. I guess you'll have to cancel your hotel. Look, we work in customer service, and if you can't be available to work, then maybe you should look for a job not in customer service. Call me back or let me know when you get back to the office which weekend you'll be working. I expect an answer. Now this call was at 8:30 in the morning, and I still had several jobs to do that day. So I called my wife and I told her what happened, and that I might just quit. She said that I should do what I thought was best, and maybe it would be good to be able to focus on school more and try to find something where they're not gonna treat me like that. I spend the rest of the day contemplating what to do, and by the time I got back to the office that afternoon, I made up my mind. I walk into the boss's office and I say, so I thought about what you said this morning and you're absolutely right. I should look for a job that's not in customer service. I quit. Hearing me say that, the boss says, whoa, don't be hasty. I can work it out so you're good the next couple of weekends and you don't have to worry about the jobs. I just respond, I've already made up my mind. You've tried to hold the fact that I have a drill over my head and make me work the weekend you knew I was taking my wife out of town. The boss says, well, you should go home tonight and think about it. Let me know in the morning after you've had some time to think. So with that, I just went home. I gathered all my uniforms up, washed them, and removed my name tags. I think the boss thought that I was gonna come back the next day and change my mind, because the guy scheduled me for several jobs solo that day when I arrived at the office. He was sorely mistaken. I just turned in my uniforms, collected my tools, and left, after he and the branch manager both begged me to stay, saying that they didn't have anyone to take my jobs and that I would be hurting the company if I didn't stay. I focused on school the next few months, and I wound up getting a job in IT, where I was making a lot more money with a lot less stress on my mind and body. Hope you enjoyed my post. Yeah, that is definitely the right way to go about things, and it seems like OP did make the right choice in the end. I just love how the boss was shocked and backpedaled hard when he made OP choose between this job and their happiness, and OP chose the latter. Lesson learned: as a boss, never give an ultimatum unless you're willing to accept the other choice. And this person comments, military brat here. What your company did to you was illegal, big time. Companies cannot interfere with military service. They also can't cancel time off once approved. Your company took advantage of the fact that you wouldn't know these things. I'm glad to hear you quit and you found something better. There's no excuse for shady business practices. And this person says that's why what the company did was effed. They knew they can't interfere with reserve obligated service, so they were trying to tell OP to cancel the weekend he had scheduled with his wife in order to come into work. And while we're on the topic of ultimatums, guys, this next OP shares a post where their boss makes a huge mistake and they regret it big time. So when I was younger, I worked as an engineer for a small company. The owner, who I'll call Jake, let me know before I started that I would be doing 10-hour days, 6 days a week for about 6 months, and I would have to be flexible. Some days, they wouldn't have work for me, and other days, I'd be expected to stay a few hours late. Now this didn't bother me too much as I wasn't tight on money, and I didn't mind staying behind a few extra hours occasionally. That said, one day, I got to work, and I was told to follow instructions from the owner's brother, Steve. And Steve was an arrogant character. He always thought that he knew how to do everyone else's job better than them. We butted heads a few times, but nothing major. A few months in, I found a new job starting in a week that paid better. Later on that day, I had another disagreement with Steve. Now, the situation was petty, but it's his response that really confused me. It ended with him screaming in my face saying, "If you don't do as I say, then you can effing leave. I don't want you here. So you either obey me and have a job, or you can go home." Cue malicious compliance. As soon as he said that, I just packed up my stuff and left. Steve was a bit confused, thinking that I would just fall in line. The guy was too arrogant to apologize, and I had a job lined up. I decided to call up Jake, since the guy's always been chill, and I told him what happened. He told me he needed me and that I should just return to work. I told him unless he controls Steve and made him apologize, there was no way I was coming back. He refused, so I told him I'll just send in my final timesheet. Cut to 2 weeks later, and I've started my new job. I still haven't been paid for my final week, so I called Jake. And that's when Jake tells me, since you didn't give notice for leaving, you owe me for lost product of work. He said if I didn't like it, that I should sue him. And he even recommended that I should just take the loss and move on. And this was complete BS. A couple of months go by until I finally find time to file for small claims court. A few days after sending him notice, Jake paid my money, including court fees and extra. And the guy actually called me up, apologizing for the, quote, confusion. He then wanted to know when I could return to work. I'd heard from one of my ex-coworkers that when I left, it kind of started a snowball effect. People would leave when they started to realize how much of a jerk Steve was. They had gone through about 7 workers in the time I was gone, and they struggled to keep anyone for more than a week. I told him I would think about it. and I managed to string him along for a few weeks before he stopped calling me. So the moral of the story is if you think you're being treated unfairly, you shouldn't just put up with it. Your self-respect isn't worth compromising. Don't settle for being treated like crap, especially when you're willing to go above and beyond for them. This happened a few years ago. When I was 16 years old, I got my first job working for a franchise-owned pizza place. I worked there until I was 24. When I was 19 years old, I received the shift leader position, and I got a 30-cent raise. Now, our store was pretty slow, and we only had a handful of employees there, so I understood. One day, the franchise owner comes in when I'm running my shift to tell me that I would be getting a new manager. The franchise owner gave me his personal number, and he said if I needed anything, to call him if the new manager had any problems. So the next day, I'm working my 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. shift, and the new manager comes in. We'll call the guy Stan. We talk a little more, and he asked why there's not an assistant manager. I let him know that we probably don't make enough to pay an assistant manager. That's when he said that he'd figure something out, and he left. At this point, I jumped to the conclusion that he was going to make me the assistant manager, but I was wrong. I had closed that night, and I came in at 4 p.m. the next day. When I did, Stan was there with a girl that I've never seen before, and she was wearing one of our uniforms. He introduced us, and he said that's his roommate, Wendy. Now, Wendy had never worked for a pizza place before, but she had just lost her job, so he hires her as the assistant manager. Hearing that, I was shocked. And on top of that, the guy completely changes my schedule and he severely cut my hours. Oh, and guess who had to train Wendy? Before Stan and Wendy, I worked a 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. shift 4 days a week, and then 4 to close on 2 other days. Now, I just had 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. 5 days a week, no more overtime. That severely hurt me financially, but I sucked it up. The place was pretty much in my backyard, and I loved my job before all of this mess. The next couple of weeks are okay, except we're coming up short every night that I close. Usually, no more than $10, but that's a lot. And it was coming back on me because I'm the one who does the nightly inventory, the paperwork, and deposits. So of course, I brought the shortage problem to Stan, and he told me if it kept happening, he would start taking it from my paycheck. Now, I had never stolen a penny from this place, and at that point, I felt pretty attacked. He says he wasn't accusing me, just letting me know what he would have to do. So if I bring it up again, expect my pay to be deducted. I said, fine. I also told him that every day from now on, when I close, I want to do a shift change. A shift change, for all who don't know, is basically counting down the drawers, which would help figure out where the shortages are coming from. He agrees. So the very next day, I go in at 4 o'clock, and I start clocking in and all that fun stuff before Wendy leaves. I look at the order screen for the day to see how well we did for lunch, money-wise. And that's when I noticed something. It said that at 12 o'clock, a customer who happened to be one of my regulars had called and ordered 10 pizzas for pickup. It then said the order was canceled. Now, they had never canceled before, so I was concerned. And here's a quick side note. I feel that I was being more of a manager than both of mine put together. So when I was in the back office counting the drawers, Wendy was covering the front. I pick up the phone and I call the customer from earlier. I didn't ask why he canceled. I asked how his experience was today since we had a new manager. He said it was fine, except she needed to learn how to work the credit card machine. Apparently she told him that she could only take cash. He said he left, went to the ATM, and came back and paid $80 in cash for the pizzas. He said other than that, everything was fine. I then asked to confirm, and he said he most definitely didn't cancel. So here's one possibility. The credit card machine did go down, and she could only accept cash. So she canceled the order in the computer until he came back and paid. And she just forgot to ring it up again. That would be harmless. But in this case, I think she's stealing. And here's where the malicious compliance came in. I knew that if I went to Stan, the guy wouldn't do anything about it, as him and Wendy were best buds. And the guy did tell me not to bring anything up again regarding this, so I just call our owner, Eric. I ask his opinion, and he says he thinks I'm right, so he tells me what to do. First, I wasn't allowed to say a word about it to Stan or Wendy. He said to let Wendy leave and to finish out the day as usual. He said if she's not stealing, you'll come up $80 over at the end of the night. If she is stealing, we should break even. I finished counting and I found out we were $1 short. The next day is when the magic happens. I go in at 4 o'clock as usual. Wendy's there waiting for Stan to pick her up, and that's when Eric walks in. He tells her to follow him to the office, and he tells me to send Stan back when he gets here. Stan comes in and he asked why Eric is there. I just shrug and I tell him he's wanted in the office. Maybe 20 minutes later, Stan walks out and he's looking pissed. He pushes past me and he gets in his car. Wendy comes out next and she yells at me saying she hopes I'm happy. Eric hadn't come out of the office yet, so I went back there to talk to him. That's when he told me in 3 weeks, they stole over $1,000 between them, and he never would have known if it wasn't for me. He then says, oh, as of today, you're the new assistant manager. So yeah, I was promoted and I stayed a few more years after this. And then I left to do the mom thing. I actually miss it sometimes. Wendy and Stan Facebook stalked me for a couple of months after that, and it was pretty hilarious. Yeah, I think we can all agree that both of those idiots deserve to lose their jobs. And who else knew it was fishy as soon as Stan hired his roommate Wendy when she was nowhere near qualified for the job? And extra fishy when Stan told OP to not bring up the shortage ever again. And here's another thing, when crappy managers try to tell you that you have to pay out of pocket for a workplace mistake, you should remind them that it's illegal as heck and they would be reported if they want to play that game. And just going through the comments, guys, it's crazy how often managers steal money at fast food joints. This person shares their experience and they say, I had a very similar thing happen when I was younger and I was working at a taco franchise. The longtime manager that everyone respected and enjoyed working with had found a better job. More power to her, but it sucked for us. They then hired this girl who had previously been working at another taco place. As with anyone new, it did take a bit to get things running smoothly, but we made it. And then the money started missing. I closed one night when another management trainee was there. Between the two of us, the money was counted 4 times, and it came up perfect every time. The next day, I come in, and the new manager says we're $20 short, and it's coming out of my check. Since this was the only job I could find at the time, I was more than a little pissed at being accused of theft. So I clocked in, went straight to the phone, and I called our area supervisor. I told him how we had counted the money not twice as usual, but 4 times, due to this girl training. He was very attentive, took all my info, asking questions, and he seemed to be taking notes. When we were about to hang up, that's when I mentioned my check. He told me not to worry about it, as they weren't docking my check, as they weren't allowed to, and that he would be in shortly. A few hours later, the guy comes in, with one of the owners in tow, and they went straight to the back office. It was too busy for me to try to see what they were doing, but not long after that, they came out, said their goodbyes, and left, without saying much of anything to anyone, much less about missing money. Within a week, they fired her for stealing. It turns out it was almost comically easy to catch her. They simply waited until I, or whoever closed, was gone. They then came in, opened the safe, and counted the money, and then returned it to the safe, along with the daily tally sheet. This was before phone cameras were common, but they did bring a camera and they photographed the accurate, unaltered tally sheet. When the new manager was taking the daily deposit to the bank, she just used whiteout to change the numbers, and she took $20 or $40 to pad her pocket. And the funny thing is, her downfall was blaming a stubborn person like me. Okay, so buckle up because this is a long one. I worked as a writer and editor for over a decade, and in that time, I've had my fair share of bad bosses, like anyone. but there's one boss that completely takes the cake. I worked for a large media company that had dealings with a number of companies and subsidiaries, ranging from publishing to fashion to sports to tech. You name it, they did it. How our writing department worked was that each writer would have specific areas they would write for, kind of like how journalists have beats they cover. So if you were assigned to the fashion arm of the company or one of its partners or subsidiaries, you wrote or edited everything for that arm. That said, I worked for this company for about a year and a half before a new manager was hired. She was the second in command of our department. Her job and our department director's job was to update our internal style guide when necessary. And for those that don't know, a style guide is a reference document for how to either refer to things or how to format things for the company/partners. Before her tenure as manager, this was only done maybe once or twice a year, and the changes were relatively minimal since the style guide was very well established in the company and had been in place for a number of years. After she came on, it was being updated at least once a week, if not multiple times a week. It legitimately became an obsession for her. Aside from the general annoyance of keeping up with it, it didn't take long for me and my coworkers to reach the conclusion that our new manager didn't have the faintest idea of what she was doing. Each new version had more and more glaring errors. At first, we all ignored these changes, giving her the benefit of the doubt and hoping, albeit naively, that these new directives were mistakes. That was until people started getting reprimanded for not following the style guide. I was the first to get a one-on-one closed-door talk. One of the departments I wrote for was sports, and she had seen that I had not been following the new rule of how I was to refer to the men's and women's teams I covered. And truthfully, I had willfully ignored it, hoping it was just a mistake. To my horror, however, it appeared that my new writing manager didn't understand basic grammar. You see, the change that she implemented removed the apostrophe from men's and women's. So for example, if I was covering men's basketball with an apostrophe in men's, I was to refer to it as men's basketball without the apostrophe. Her rationale was that the men did not own the team, therefore it should not be possessive. Apparently, her understanding of the English language did not evolve past grade school explanations. Honestly, I was pretty dumbfounded at first. I tried to bleakly explain that men is already plural, and that a possessive S doesn't always denote direct ownership. Example, men's bathroom. At that, she stared blankly at me for a few seconds, and for the briefest of moments, I thought maybe I was seeing the cogs in her head turn. However, she doubles down. Realizing the fight was lost, I told her that I would implement the changes going forward. Now here's where my malicious compliance comes in. We worked for and with some very high-profile companies, and mistakes were not tolerated for things that were outward-facing. Realizing her idiocy would cost me my job, I made a simple request. I said to her, "Could you please email me the exact style guide rule you're referencing, and how exactly you'd like me to implement it, with examples of where I messed up?" My boss just looked at me like I was stupid for not understanding what's being asked of me, but she still wrote it all down in an email for me. I also made sure that any further style changes were referenced in an email, and I specifically asked that if there were further changes, to please cite how I'd done them in the past, along with how she'd like them to be done from now on. Sure enough, a little bit after this, I was fired, and at my exit interview, I handed HR a folder containing every written communication regarding the style changes, along with quite a bit of evidence that she was passing off her projects to other members of the department and changing people's work behind their back. She was fired 3 months after me, along with our department director 3 months after that. It turns out my little folder sparked a full investigation by HR, and after interviewing other coworkers in the department, they realized that she had done all of this BS to have grounds to fire people within the department she didn't like. I just happened to be the first on the chopping block, and the project she was passing off to other people, she was taking the credit for what they were doing to make herself look good. and the changes that she was making to other people's work, HR realized that she was changing things to make it explicitly incorrect. You gotta love the software that tracks changes and timestamps and lists the user. On top of this, they also discovered that she had exaggerated and fabricated large portions of her resume. By the time she was fired, I'd found another job in a different department at the same company. It was a good gig, and my new manager wasn't a complete C-word. Eventually, I did move on from that company, but if anything, my time there taught me a very valuable lesson: to document, and document some more. It might just save you from a nasty boss. Guys, OP's last sentence says it all, right? Like, when you're dealing with an incompetent, egotistical manager like that, it's always best to cover your ass. And seriously, finding out that she only did that BS to fire people she didn't like is downright outrageous. Just like how she faked her whole resume, but who's not surprised? And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, I know it's been a while, it's an r/entitled People episode, where Karens are demanding their kids ride other people's dogs. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.